The first thing Din Tao noticed was not the rain, not the neon lights flickering above the street, not the distant sound of footsteps rushing past him, not even the cold soaking through his coat. It was absence, a small, precise absence, the kind that didn't belong in his world. He stood still for exactly 2 seconds, then his hand moved instinctively to his chest. Empty. That was when everything around him changed. The men behind him stopped talking. One of them turned sharply. Another scanned the street without being told. No one asked what was wrong, because they already knew. Din Tao did not lose things, and if something was missing, it meant someone had taken it. Across the street, beneath a flickering streetlight that buzzed louder than it should have, Zuri Masando stood still. She hadn't meant to stop walking. She hadn't meant to notice it. But it was there, right at the edge of the curb, half hidden by rainwater and shadow. A wallet. Black. Heavy. Out of place. For a moment, she just looked at it. Not because she was unsure what it was, but because she already knew what it meant. Slowly, she bent down and picked it up. It felt wrong in her hands. Too clean, too expensive, too full. She didn't open it immediately, because she didn't need to. Some things you could feel before you saw them. And this was the kind of thing that changed lives. She opened it anyway. Cash, thick stacks of it, more money than she had ever held. Her fingers tightened slightly, not out of greed, out of recognition, because just that morning she had stood in front of a door that might not be hers much longer. 3 days, that was what the paper said. 3 days before everything was gone. Across the street, Din Tao had already started turning, not fast, not frantic, but deliberate, the kind of movement that made people move out of the way without understanding why. His eyes scanned once, then again, and then they stopped, not on the crowd, not on his men, but on her, a girl in a worn hoodie, standing in the rain, holding something she should not have had.
No, where's my wallet? I can't... Where?
Din Tao did not reach for his pocket again. He didn't need to. Men like him did not check twice. If something was gone, it was gone. And that meant only one thing. Someone had taken it. The rain continued to fall, steady and indifferent, tapping against the pavement and sliding down the polished shoulders of his coat. Around him, the street moved, but only slightly, slower now, careful. Because something had shifted. It started with the man to his right, Baek Ji-soo. He had been mid-sentence before Din Tao's hand moved to his chest. Now he was silent, eyes sharp, already scanning the ground, the gutters, the passing feet. To his left, Han Myung-il took a single step forward, placing himself half a pace ahead without being told. His gaze moved differently, not searching, but assessing. People, faces, reactions. No one spoke. They didn't need confirmation. Din Tao's stillness was enough. A wallet was not just a wallet, not his. Inside it were cards no one should see, numbers no one should touch, connections that did not exist on paper but controlled things that did. And the cash? That was irrelevant. It wasn't about money. It was about access. And in Din Tao's world, access was everything. A woman passing by slowed for a fraction of a second, just long enough to feel the weight in the air, before lowering her gaze and walking faster. 2 men across the street turned away completely. Even the distant conversations seemed to thin, like the sound itself didn't want to stay. Because instinctively, people understood. Something had gone wrong. Very wrong. Baek Ji-soo finally spoke, his voice low. When? Din Tao didn't answer immediately. His eyes moved once across the street, calm, calculating. Then, just now. That was enough. Han Myung-il exhaled quietly. Then it hasn't gone far. Not a question, a fact. His hand lifted slightly, and within seconds, 2 more men appeared from the edges of the street, silent, precise, already adjusting their positions. No shouting, no chaos, just control. The kind that didn't need to raise its voice. Din Tao stepped forward. 1 step. That was all it took. The space around him opened instantly. People moved without being asked. Umbrellas shifted. Paths cleared. Eyes dropped. He walked slowly, deliberately, his gaze moving with quiet precision, not searching for the wallet, searching for the mistake, because whoever had taken it had made one. They always did. The rain traced down his jaw, but he didn't notice. His attention had already narrowed. Patterns, movement, stillness where there shouldn't be. And then he stopped. Not abruptly, not sharply, just enough to signal that something had changed. Behind him, his men froze immediately. His eyes had found something, or rather, someone, across the street. Small, still, out of place. A girl in a faded hoodie, standing in the rain like she wasn't in a hurry to be anywhere else. And in her hand, something black, something rectangular, something that did not belong to her. For a moment, Din Tao saw nothing, did nothing, but the air shifted again. Because now, this was no longer about what was lost, it was about what had been found, and why it hadn't disappeared.
Zuri Masando did not move when the rain grew heavier. She had learned a long time ago that moving didn't always change anything. Sometimes it just made you tired faster. The hood of her sweatshirt was pulled low, darkened by water, clinging slightly to her temples. Beneath it, her face remained still, calm in a way that wasn't peaceful, just practiced. The kind of calm that came from knowing panic didn't solve anything. Her fingers tightened slightly around the wallet, not because she was afraid of dropping it, but because she could feel what it carried. Weight, not just physical, the kind that pressed into your thoughts, the kind that made you think about things you tried not to think about, like doors closing, like empty cupboards, like the quiet voice of her younger brother asking, "Are we still staying here?" She hadn't answered him that morning because she didn't know how to. The paper was still folded inside her bag, creased along the edges from being opened too many times. 3 days. That was what it said. 3 days before the locks changed. 3 days before the place that still smelled faintly like their mother's cooking stopped being theirs. Zuri shifted her weight slightly, her shoes making a soft sound against the wet pavement. They were worn thin at the soles. She could feel the cold through them, but she didn't react. Cold was familiar. Hunger was familiar. Uncertainty was familiar. What wasn't familiar was this. She glanced down at the wallet again. This time she opened it fully. The cash inside didn't look real. Too clean, too crisp, too much. Her breath slowed, not because she was overwhelmed, but because she was thinking, calculating, what it meant, what it could do. Rent, food, time. Not everything, but enough. Enough to breathe, enough to stop the countdown. For a moment, the world around her disappeared. Not the rain, not the street, just everything that came after, everything that could be different. Her fingers hovered over the edge of the bills, not touching, just close enough. She could take it. No one would know. No one was looking. No one ever looked at her long enough to remember her face. That was the advantage of being invisible, and for once, invisibility could save her. Her jaw tightened slightly. Then she exhaled, slow, controlled, and closed the wallet. Not quickly, not dramatically, just firmly, like sealing something shut, because she already knew, not what would happen next, but who she was. Zuri adjusted her grip, holding the wallet more securely now, not like something she had found, but like something she was responsible for. Across the street, movement shifted. She noticed it this time, not because she was looking for it, but because it didn't belong to the normal rhythm of the street. People were moving around someone, not away, around, like water bending around stone. Her eyes lifted slightly, and for the first time, she saw him clearly. The man in the black coat, still, watching, not confused, not searching, just aware. Her expression didn't change, but something inside her did. Not fear, not yet, just recognition, the kind that came without explanation, that told her one simple thing. The wallet in her hand didn't just belong to someone, it belonged to him.
Zuri did not cross the street. Not yet. She stood where she was, the distance between them holding steady, as if the rain itself had drawn a line neither of them had agreed to step across. Her fingers loosened slightly around the wallet, then tightened again. It would have been easier if it were empty, if it were just leather and cards and something that clearly belonged to someone else. Something simple, but it wasn't. It carried weight, possibility, escape. She looked down again, slower this time, as if the contents might have changed. They hadn't. The bills sat exactly where they were before, neat, untouched, waiting. Too much to ignore, too much to pretend didn't matter. Her thumb brushed the edge of one stack, just lightly, enough to feel the texture. Real. It was real. Her mind didn't race, it didn't spiral. It moved carefully, the way it always did when something mattered too much to get wrong. 3 days. That number returned, steady and uninvited. Not loud, not urgent, just present. 3 days before the door closed behind them. 3 days before her brother asked a question she wouldn't be able to answer. She could fix that. Not everything, but enough. Enough to stop the fall. Enough to breathe. Her grip shifted, just slightly. The kind of movement no one would notice. The kind that could become something else if she let it. No one was watching her. No one was paying attention. Across the street, movement continued, but it wasn't focused on her. Not yet. She could turn, walk, disappear into the flow of people and umbrellas and shadows. No one would stop her. No one ever did. That was the truth she had lived with. The world didn't pause for people like her. It didn't ask questions. It didn't care enough to follow. Her hand stilled, not because she was unsure, but because she understood. This wasn't about whether she could take it. She could, easily. This was about what came after. Not the money, not the food, not the extra time, but the part of her that would have to carry it. The part that would know. Her jaw tightened slightly. Her eyes closed for a brief moment, not long enough to draw attention, just enough to quiet the noise inside her. When she opened them again, nothing had changed. The rain was still falling, the street still moving, the weight still in her hand, but the decision, that had settled. Slowly, deliberately, she adjusted her grip on the wallet, not like someone hiding it, not like someone claiming it, like someone holding something that didn't belong to them. Her fingers moved away from the bills. No hesitation now, no second guessing, just clarity. She turned it slightly in her hand, closing it fully. The sound was soft, final. Across the street, the man in the black coat had not moved, still watching, still waiting. Zuri didn't look away this time. She held his gaze for a fraction longer than before, not challenging, not defiant, just steady. Then she took a step forward, not toward safety, not toward escape, but toward him. And in that moment, she gave up the only thing that could have saved her for something she couldn't even see yet.
Zuri stepped off the curb. The rain did not slow for her. It fell the same way it had all night, steady, indifferent, tapping against the pavement, sliding off umbrellas, turning reflections into shifting streaks of light beneath her feet. She walked anyway, not fast, not hesitant, just steady. Each step carried her further into a space that did not belong to her. Across the street, something changed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't obvious, but it was immediate. Han Myung-il moved first, a slight shift of his stance, barely noticeable to anyone else, but enough to place himself between Din Tao and the approaching figure. Baek Ji-soo's gaze narrowed, tracking her movement with quiet precision. Another man, positioned further back, adjusted his angle, creating a line that didn't look like a barrier, but was. No one spoke. They didn't need to. This was how their world worked. A single, unknown variable moving too close, and everything recalibrated. Zuri felt it, not as fear, but as awareness. The air had changed. The space in front of her was no longer neutral. It belonged to him, and she was walking into it. Still, she didn't stop. Her fingers remained steady around the wallet, not gripping too tightly, not loose enough to drop, just controlled, the way everything about her was. A few steps closer, the distance shortened, the details sharpened. She could see him clearly now, the man in the black coat, rain tracing the edges of his face, untouched by reaction, still, composed, watching, not surprised anymore, not searching, just certain. Her shoes pressed softly against the wet ground. Each step sounded louder than it should have, or maybe it was just the silence around them making it feel that way. No one crossed between them now. No one passed too close. Even the street seemed to bend slightly around this moment. 10 steps away, Han Myung-il's hand shifted subtly, not reaching for a weapon, not yet, but ready. Baek Ji-soo tilted his head slightly, as if recalculating something that didn't make sense. A girl, alone, walking directly toward Din Tao, not running, not pleading, not afraid. That was the part that didn't fit. Zuri noticed none of it in detail, but she felt all of it. The weight of attention, the quiet expectation of something going wrong. She kept walking. 5 steps now, close enough to see the fine lines in his expression, the slight tension in his jaw, the way his hand had lowered, but not relaxed. Close enough to understand something without being told. This was not a man people approached. This was a man people avoided. 3 steps. No one moved to stop her, but no one moved away either. 2 steps. The rain softened slightly, or maybe everything else had just gone quieter. 1 step. And then she stopped, right in front of him. The distance between them was small now, small enough to feel, small enough to matter. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Din Tao looked down at her, not dismissively, not impatiently, but with a kind of focus that suggested he had already decided this moment was important. Zuri met his gaze, steady, unwavering. Then, without a word, she lifted her hand and held the wallet out toward him. The movement was simple, but everything around it wasn't, because in that moment, every man behind him was ready. Every possibility had been considered, every outcome had been accounted for, except one, the one standing right in front of him, offering something back, instead of taking it away.
Din Tao did not take the wallet immediately. He looked at it first. Not the leather, not the edges worn smooth with use. The space between his hand and hers, the stillness of it. Then his gaze lifted, meeting her eyes again, searching not for fear, not for guilt, but for inconsistency. There was none. Only quiet, only certainty. Slowly, he reached out. His fingers closed around the wallet, brushing briefly against hers, cold from the rain, steady despite it. He took it. Zuri let go without resistance. No hesitation, no lingering, just release. For a moment, nothing moved. Then Din Tao opened it.
The sound was soft, precise. Inside, everything remained exactly as it had been. Cards aligned, edges untouched. The cash, he paused there, not because he needed to count it, but because he didn't. He knew. If even one bill had been missing, he would have felt it before seeing it. Still, he checked. One stack, then another, unmoved, untouched. Behind him, Baek Ji-soo shifted slightly, not out of doubt, but out of confusion, because this did not happen, not here, not to them. Din Tao closed the wallet again. This time, the sound carried differently. He didn't look at his men. He didn't need to. The answer was already in the silence. Then he looked back at her. "You opened it?" It wasn't a question. Zuri didn't look away. Yes. Her voice was quiet, not apologetic, not defensive, just true. Another pause. "Why didn't you take it?" The rain filled the space between them for a second. Then, "Because it isn't mine." Simple. No explanation, no performance, the kind of answer that didn't try to impress. Din Tao watched her longer this time, not measuring, not judging, just observing. His gaze dropped briefly. Her shoes, worn thin, water seeping in at the edges. Her sleeves, slightly too short, fabric faded unevenly with time. Then, the corner of something in her bag, paper, folded, creased, out of place. His hand moved before she could react, not fast, not aggressive, just certain. He pulled it free. Zuri's fingers tightened slightly, but she didn't stop him, didn't try. The paper unfolded easily. The ink had blurred at the edges from being handled too often. 3 days. The words sat there plainly. Final notice. Eviction. Din Tao read it once, then again, not because he didn't understand, but because he did. Behind him, someone exhaled quietly. Another man shifted his weight. Now they understood, the full picture. She hadn't returned the wallet because she didn't need the money. She had returned it despite needing it. Din Tao folded the paper slowly, carefully, as if the way he handled it mattered. Then he looked at her again. This time, something had changed. Not in his posture, not in his expression, but in the space behind his eyes. Recognition, not of her face, but of her decision. The kind that didn't make sense, unless it did. For a moment, no one spoke. The rain softened, the street breathed again, and the silence that followed was no longer the same, because something had shifted, not in the world around them, but in him. Din Tao did not return the paper immediately. He held it for a moment longer than necessary, the rain softening its edges, the ink already familiar in a way that had nothing to do with memory. Then he folded it once, clean, exact, and placed it back into her bag, not tossed, not handed, placed, as if acknowledging that it belonged there. Zuri didn't speak. She didn't thank him. She didn't explain. She simply watched, the same way she had from the beginning, steady, present, unmoved by anything that wasn't real. Behind him, the street had begun to breathe again. People moved, conversations resumed. The city tried to return to itself, but the space between them held, unchanged. Din Tao looked at her, not as a stranger now, not as a risk, but as something that didn't fit into any category he trusted. "Do you work?" The question landed quietly. Zuri blinked once, as if adjusting to it. Then, "I can." No hesitation, no embellishment, just truth. Baek Ji-soo shifted slightly behind him. It was subtle, but not enough to hide what it meant. This was not a question Din Tao asked. Not like this. Not here. Din Tao reached into his coat. For a brief second, the men behind him tensed, not out of fear, but out of instinct. He pulled out a card, black, minimal, the kind that didn't need explanation. He held it between his fingers for a moment, as if considering something that had already been decided. Then he extended it toward her. Tomorrow. One word. Measured. Final. Zuri looked at the card, then at him. She didn't reach for it immediately, not out of doubt, but because she understood something without it being said. This was not help. This was not charity. This was something else, something that came with weight, the same kind she had felt when she first picked up the wallet. Slowly she took it, her fingers closed around the edge, careful, like before. Din Tao watched the movement, the same way he had watched everything else, nothing wasted, nothing exaggerated. Then, after a brief pause, he spoke again. For someone who has nothing. His voice remained calm, controlled, but not distant. You chose not to take what wasn't yours. Zuri held his gaze, not proud, not ashamed, just certain. That matters. The words settled between them, not loud, but undeniable. Behind him, no one moved, because they understood now. This wasn't about the wallet anymore. This was about a line that had never been crossed before. Din Tao did not trust people. He used them, measured them, replaced them, but he did not trust them. Not like this, not without proof. And yet, here it was, not built over time, not negotiated, given, quietly, without ceremony. He stepped back slightly, not retreating, making space, an invitation without saying the word. Zuri glanced down at the card again, then back at him. The rain had softened to a mist now, the sharp edges of the moment fading into something else, something quieter, something that would last longer. She slipped the card into her pocket, not like something temporary, like something she intended to keep, and in that small, almost unnoticeable movement, 2 lives shifted, not dramatically, not loudly, but permanently, because in a world where everything was taken, she had returned something, and for the first time, Din Tao chose to give something back, without expecting it to be taken away.